As a child, the shadow of the lunch lady always hung over me like a terrible nightmare. Not that she was any kind of monster, but her appearance and mannerisms caused me an overwhelming feeling of disgust. That stinking breath, reminiscent of rotten eggs, the dead look that seemed to pierce through me, and of course, that disgusting chin covered with gray stubble. All this made my heart beat like crazy every time I saw her face. Standing in line for lunch was especially scary. It seemed that time slowed down, and every step brought me closer to this terrible meeting. And even when I finally left the cafeteria, the feeling of anxiety did not leave me for a long time. Once, during another school fight, I had to spend the weekend at school. Together with me in the detention room were Jeremy, my sworn enemy, Nick, a local football player, and a quiet, inconspicuous girl. We sat in silence, trying not to pay attention to each other. But soon boredom took over, and we began to whisper. The conversation inevitably turned to our mutual dislike of the lunch lady. We exchanged jokes about her appearance and mannerisms, trying to somehow dilute the monotony of our situation. Suddenly, we heard strange sounds coming from the dining room. It sounded like some kind of mechanical grinding and hissing. Jeremy suggested that the lunch lady might have decided to cook us for dinner. This thought caused us surprise and even some fear. We began to discuss what could happen if she really decided to eat us. The most terrible pictures were painted in our imaginations. But the worst part was that we couldn't understand why she was behaving like that at all. Why was she always so gloomy and unpleasant? Maybe she had some tragic past? Or maybe she was just crazy. These questions tormented us the whole time we were sitting in that room. And although many years have passed since then, the memories of the lunch lady still cause me disgust and fear. She became for me a symbol of everything that was the worst in my childhood. Jeremy flipped the coin, his heart pounding in his chest. As the coin landed, a wave of dread washed over Ashley's face. "Please don't," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "Come on, guys, don't make a big deal out of this," I urged. "No way," Jeremy replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "It was your idea. You should go." "Shut up already," Nick interrupted, his voice sharp. "I'll go." With that, he disappeared down the hallway, leaving us to stew in anticipation. Minutes ticked by, the silence stretching into an eternity. I was about to suggest we retreat when Nick reappeared, his face pale and drawn. He motioned us to follow, a look of fear in his eyes. We tiptoed down the hallway, our senses heightened, every creak and whisper sending shivers down our spines. "She's gone," Nick whispered, his voice barely audible. "If we're quiet, we might be able to make it to the front door unnoticed." Jeremy, ever the impulsive one, nodded eagerly. "Let's do it." With that, he took the lead, his footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. We followed closely behind, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we neared the front doors, a wave of relief washed over us. We were almost free. But then disaster struck. The doors were locked, firmly secured by a heavy chain. "What the hell?" Jeremy muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "Let me try," I said, taking a deep breath. I tugged and pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The sound of the struggling handle echoed through the hallway, a beacon for anyone who might be lurking nearby. "You idiot!" I hissed at Jeremy, dragging him away from the door. "What were you thinking?" We stood there, frozen in fear, listening intently for any sign of movement. A few moments later, we heard footsteps approaching. Our hearts raced as the footsteps grew louder, closer. "Run!" I yelled, and we all bolted in different directions. Jeremy and I turned right, while Nick and Ashley went left. As we rounded the corner, we heard Ashley's terrified scream, followed by the lunch lady's menacing voice. "I've got you," she snarled. We didn't dare look back. We raced down the hallway, our breaths ragged, our hearts pounding. Jeremy led us into an empty classroom, and we huddled together, our bodies trembling. "Guys, you won't believe this," Nick said, his voice shaking. "I saw her." She grabbed Ashley and hit her over the head with a wrench. She was dragging her body down the hall, covered in blood. "I came to find you guys." "She knocked her out." "Or worse," Jeremy added, his voice filled with dread. We need to get out of here now. We need to find a room with windows, I suggested. Forget it, Jeremy interrupted. We're not going to break through glass. There's only one other way out, Nick said, the back doors. That's our only chance, Jeremy agreed. With renewed determination, we crept down the hallway, our senses on high alert. As we neared the cafeteria, we heard Mrs. Kowalski's voice echoing through the building. Hello there, she said, her voice distorted through the intercom. I see you've left your room. That's unfortunate. However, I promised there would be no consequences if you simply returned to room 126. Ashley is waiting for you there. We have to help her, I cried. Forget it, Jeremy said, his voice hard. She's dead. We need to get out of here. Nick, however, had other ideas. He bolted down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. What are you doing? I shouted, but he was gone. Let him go, Jeremy said, pulling me along. We need to leave now. We raced through the hallways, the sound of Nick's scream echoing in our ears. As we turned the corner, we saw the back entrance, a beacon of hope. With renewed energy, we rushed towards it, our hearts pounding in our chests. Jeremy yanked at the door handles, his desperation growing with each futile attempt. Oh God, no, no, he cried, his voice echoing through the silent hallway. Trapped, I collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving floor, my body heavy with exhaustion and dread. My stomach churned, a nauseating sensation rising from the pit. As I lay there, my gaze drifted to the end of the hallway. A pair of black boots materialized, slowly approaching. The lunch lady, a grotesque figure wielding a bloody wrench, emerged from the shadows. Her face, twisted with a sadistic glee, was a horrifying sight. Jeremy, still struggling with the door, let out a cry of pain as the wrench connected with his skull. Blood splattered the walls, a macabre painting of violence and terror. Wave after wave of nausea washed over me, and I closed my eyes, willing myself to fade away. When I finally opened my eyes, the harsh fluorescent lights of the cafeteria blinded me. My head throbbed and my body ached. I was tied to a chair, my wrists raw and bleeding. I struggled against the ropes, but they were too tight. Defeated, I resigned myself to my fate. As I sat there, I heard the familiar sound of the kitchen equipment whirring. Ah, you're awake, a voice sneered. I turned my head, my eyes meeting the lunch lady's cold, dead gaze. She was standing at the counter, preparing a meal. Give me a minute. Lunch is almost ready, she said, her voice dripping with malice. I tried to squirm free, but the ropes held firm. The lunch lady returned, carrying a plate covered with a cloth. Did you have a nice nap? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I remained silent, my heart pounding in my chest. So what? No thank you? Is that how you repay me for feeding you? For working hard in this hot, dirty kitchen all day? She ranted. You kids are all the same. You take what you can get and never show any gratitude. She placed a plate in front of me and untied my arms. Eat, she commanded, her voice laced with menace. I lifted the cloth and my stomach lurched. On the plate was a grotesque, macabre feast. A monstrous sausage surrounded by a ring of severed fingers, toes, eyes, and ears. Eat, she repeated, her voice growing louder. I couldn't bring myself to do it. My body revolted at the sight of the gruesome meal. I can't, I whispered, my voice barely audible. She raised the wrench, her eyes filled with a cold, calculating fury. Eat, she demanded, her voice a low growl. With trembling hands, I picked up the fork and forced myself to eat. Each bite was a struggle, a battle against my own instincts. I choked down the grotesque food, tears streaming down my face. When I finally finished, the lunch lady nodded in satisfaction. Very good, she said. Now that you've had your lunch, it's my turn. She raised the wrench high above her head. As she brought it down, I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable.